So yeah, research is important. Okay. Bingo. Here's an example of a small bed. I showed you that spot, that small bed. We have about 150 square feet between our garage and our sidewalk. And normally, if I was working with a client, I'd be like, we're using all 1 and 2 socioability level plants, things that aren't going to spread too easily on us. But I've gone against my own rules in this bed because I like to experiment. I've mixed things up. I've got sedge species that are clumpers. I got sedge species that cast out a lot of seed, like Carex blanda. Thicker leaf sedge throws out a lot of seed. I've got Pacra aurea in there, which is like a level 3 in sociability. Geranium maculatum, which is wild geranium, it's level 2 or 3. There's Aquilegia canadensis in there, and I don't think it's it's clay soil and it's pretty dense. A lot of competition in there. It's not self sowing around very much at all, and it's getting some hot afternoon sun as well. So I'm experimenting with these plants, and I encourage you to do that too. I love it. You guys are helping each other out in the chat. I had to go look over there real quick. Keep it up, guys. All right, let's look at matrix real quick as well, because this is how you're going to design your garden. This is the design methodology. Okay. Now, if you've heard this before, it's just a good refresher. If you haven't heard it before, it's not a refresher. It's new to you. It's exciting. It's like NBC. All right, Matrix 101. What's a matrix? It can refer to the entire tightly knit planting in your bed, or just simply the ground cover base layer or living green mulch. Now, living green mulch is I should be able to explain this well, right? I've done it enough times. Living green mulch is basically your base that you're working in. So that could be a short bunch grass. It could be a sedge species. So I'm going to show you pictures here in a second. So you can think of the matrix as a rope or a straw that's sort of unfurled across the landscape. Think of a gingham pattern. Think of a crosshatch flannel shirt. That's sort of the matrix idea. It's not this. Wish it was. I wish gardeners had this sort of power. Maybe someday. It's possible. So here's a matrix plan. All those green little dots are a short bunch grass called Butula gracilis, blue grama. So those are placed every 12 inches. This is just a 50 square foot plan, full sun, clay, sand, loamy, clay. Pretty species on this plan are pretty adaptable. But the point is the Butula gracilis is the matrix. It's every 12 inches on a grid pattern. And then we come in and we mass and drift different forb, different flower species that are blooming throughout the season. Okay, so that's what a matrix is. I think this design is incredibly approachable, no matter your experience level. And I think it makes a heck of a lot of sense. And it mimics nature pretty well. When you go out to a prairie or a meadow, and again, prairies and meadows and savannas and whatever the name you use, they are in every state in the continental United States and beyond, of course, around the world, Canada, South Africa, they're everywhere. But when you go out to the wild, this is what a matrix looks like. This is self-organized. Nobody has, gone and been like, okay, I went 3 purple coneflower here, 3 purple coneflower there, blah, blah, blah. This is what it looks like. Everything's stitched together. You have your grass base layer of little blue stems and side-oats grommas, and then you have your flowers self-organizing and massing in drifts according to their sociability levels, their competition, how well they don't compete with other plant species. Here's a matrix that doesn't have any flowers in it. So it's very modern or contemporary, a hell strip between a street and a sidewalk. This is Bouteloua gracilis, blue grama, one of my favorite matrix ground cover living green mulch plants to use. But it definitely needs some coneflowers or some asters or some orange butterfly weed, something, right? We got to get some color and support some adult pollinators, and also have some more larval host plants for butterflies and moths and bugs and whatnot than just grass. Here's a slightly more complex matrix. Okay, this is just 2 species. Little blue stem is the grass, that's going to be taller, about 3 feet tall or so. And then Eryngium yuccifolium, rattlesnake master. This is native central eastern United States. Nice pairing. The little blue stem has, that blue-green foliage, and so does the rattlesnake master. So maybe they go together pretty well. But again, these are taller species, so this is more of a taller garden. I wouldn't necessarily suggest, using those species in a smaller garden of 100 square feet or less or something. I'm so glad that PowerPoint had a rainbow puke emoji. All right, Let's keep going. So less is always more in small gardens. I think less is more in home decorating as well, although we fail at that miserably at our house, which is again, got a 6-year-old who forgets where they put their toys and they're just strewn all across the house, right? So here is a very narrow foundation bed on the north side of an elementary school. This bed is not more than 2 feet deep. It's fairly long, maybe 20 feet long or so. So do the math, that's 50 square feet or so. And we just had a very simple plant palette here because if you try to jam in too much into this small garden bed, it's going to look crazy. It's going to look overwhelming. And your management's going to be a lot more complex because of that. Just simple matrix ground cover, living green mulch of Carex albicans, white tinge sedge, easy peasy. You know, throw in a couple of geranium maculatum, which maybe you shouldn't do in a small bed like this, but I did it anyway. Because it's probably level 2 to 3 sociability. So it's going to throw out seed. And geranium, they pop up, they really explode that seed out too. So then we have the red wild columbine. Thalatrum dioicum is early meadow rue. Love, love, love early meadow rue. So the blooms aren't terribly showy unless you put a bunch of plants together. And it also depends if it's a male female plant. But the foliage is really cool. It's like all these little dime-sized leaves, literally dime-sized. They sort of look like little dimes, and they contrast so nicely with the fine texture of Carex albicans. But so does the foliage of geranium and the anemone virginiana there, the tall thimbleweed, which blooms white in the middle of summer. So this is not a lot of flowers, but as I'm going to say, perhaps on the next slide and 50 other slides here today, texture is where it's at in smaller landscapes. You don't want to overwhelm the space with a cacophony of flowers. You just don't aesthetically want to do that. And management wise, you don't want to do that. But we can do really cool things with texture contrast with even just 5 different plant species. And I hope you sort of a little bit maybe agree with that in this image here. So yep, there you go. I said it on the next slide. I don't even need to read that. You can read that. Folks tend to cram in plant species so there are flowers spring to fall, but in small space that just leads to management issues. Yeah. Okay. It's worth repeating a lot of times today because I've been on so many consults with folks walking around the landscape and it's sort of maybe what happens, at least in some instances, is it's such a frustrating spot that people just finally try anything. So one spring they get a couple of these, next spring they get a couple of those plant species, and before you know it, after a couple of years, you got 20 plant species in there, and you're just hoping something does some magic. And you never just want to rely on hope alone, right? You want to do some research. You want to attend really kick-ass webinars. So here's a little bit. This is a bigger bed. This might be, I'm going to try and think 300 to 400 square feet or something. So this might be on the larger size of a quote unquote small garden. But the matrix here in the front, so that's planting on the left. We spray killed the lawn, put down 2 inches of mulch. And then I came in and I laid out all the plugs, 2-inch pots, trays of 32, trays of 50. And so there it is a year later on the right. That's Carex albicans as the matrix in the front. And then behind there's a couple drifts of a taller sedge species called Carex springalii. Both are shade adapted, both like it dry, both can take a couple of hours of direct sun, no problem in the afternoon. If there's plenty of moisture, they can take sun all day long. These 2 species, Carex albicans and Carex springalii, are probably 2 of the most adaptable sedge species we have, although Carex springalii might like it a little bit more moist. Now somebody in the chat's going to say, what did he just say? What species was that? Oh, it's a good thing I did this for you. And we just have 2 flower species, 2 forb species right here in this portion that we're looking at here in this image. Geranium maculatum, which I am hoping sows around a little bit because I think that foliage looks pretty cool, contrasting with the fine texture foliage of Carex albicans, right? Right. And then we have Solidago flexicalis on the left, which is in clay soil. It's going to be contained a little bit better than it would be in loamy soil. I think it was spread very, very easily, especially with consistent moisture in loam soils by root runners. So again, research is important. But I'm sitting here telling you all these rules for small gardens today, but I'm also saying, but I mean, it's site conditions matter a lot because absolutely you can be researching a species and people say, oh, it's just, it's like level 3, level 4 sociability, but you switch it up a little bit and maybe it's more like a level 2. So this is about a 300 square foot bed as well underneath a mature oak tree. Yeah, no, I did do the species list. Awesome. So this isn't everything that's in here, but it's the big stuff you can see here right now in springtime. The matrix ground cover is Carex albicans, Carex pennsylvanica. Those sedge species, again, dry shade, wonderful. They love it. They're not going to get more than 12 inches tall at most. And then all the flower forb species after that, those aren't probably going to get much more than roughly 2 feet tall, especially in these site conditions, dry shade underneath the mature oak tree canopy and above its water guzzling root system. So we are good to go here. Also, we did Pulmonia reptans in there, which is oh my God, what's the word, guys? Ephemeral. I should have had more of my son's Halloween candy before I started this presentation. And hellstrips, the two. I stole a photo from my friends over at Fido Studio just because I wanted to show you a inhospitable median on a urban road. Okay, so those are good species to have in there. In fact, here's a list that I like to use in hellstrips. Again, hellstrip would be that space between the sidewalk and the street where, and these are sunny conditions. These are sunny, hot. What I'm assuming here, I'm not assuming shade underneath mature street trees on this plant list right here. There's Penstemon cobea there on the right. So I use these species all the time. It doesn't matter if it's clay or loamy clay or sandy loam or sandy clay. These species are going to be pretty adaptable in those site conditions and just brush off that heat fairly well. Take it in stride. Good questions. I keep looking at the Q&A. Keep them coming, guys. All right, so less is more again, right? In 100 square feet, aim for 10 or fewer species. Yes, you heard it here first, folks. The smaller your space, the fewer the species you should. I think 10 might even be too many. I'll show you a plan here in a little bit and we'll decide if that's true or not. Keep it simple, keep it legible and not overwhelming. This is not overwhelming aesthetically and visually to people coming by who might not who might otherwise think it's weedy or messy because it's not just lawn or a couple hostas and a bed of mulch, but also not overwhelming in the context of if you're new to this sort of design style, this natural design style that emulates wilder prairies and meadows. It's just, again, simpler. 50, 100 square feet, 200 square feet. You can walk out there and do a lot of management damage in 10 minutes, right? You can yank a couple weeds or pluck a couple new things in the ground really quickly. Can't do that in 1,000 or 5,000 square feet. That takes a little bit more commitment, which I'm all for. So 100 square feet bed, clay loam soil in full sun. This would be my suggestion. Budula gracilis blue grama matrix. And at 100 square feet, we're going to need at least 50 of those plants. I might even suggest something like 65 or 70. Having that matrix layer, that living green mulch really thick, even in small landscapes, is incredibly important to outcompeting weeds and just getting that site stabilized as soon as possible. The more plants you can afford, the better always. You can always use more plants. And if this is an older bed, you have plants in the bed already. Everybody needs that matrix ground cover living green mulch in there. I haven't seen a landscape that doesn't. So you can always add that layer in there, and that creates climate resilience and stability and habitat and shelter for all kinds of wildlife. Just getting that grass or sedge layer in underneath more established plants, even like hosta or some shrubs or daylilies, whatever you have. There's always room for more plants, even in a smaller bed. So where are we? We're at 100 square feet, clay, loam, sun, whatnot. Going to do our base layer, living green mulch of Budula gracilis. We're going to do Heuchera richardsonia, 3 groups of 5. Again, you need to research these plants, see if they're native to you, see if they're going to work in your site conditions, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't care if they're not native, again, doesn't matter. Penstemon cobea, 3 to 5 groups of 3. Again, this is 100 square feet. So I'm sitting here looking around in my office. It's a 100 square foot office. And I'm thinking to myself, yes, 3 to 5 groups of 3 plants of Pentstemon and Cobaea should work, not be too overwhelming for the space. Coreopsis verticillata, right? Threadleaf Coreopsis, 3 groups of 3 plants scattered around that 100 square feet. So you can go down the list on your own, look at those and make sense of it. Symphyotrichum oblongifolium, that's aromatic aster. That gets 2 or 3 feet wide easily after a couple of years and 18 inches or 24 inches tall. You just need one of those. You don't need any more than that. And then maybe after a couple of years, you can bring in some Asclepias tuberosa or something like that. So that would be my starter plant list. And what would that cost you? Roughly ballpark 550, 650, I think, if you're able to find plugs or 2.5-inch containers. I think those 2-inch containers are a lot easier to find at local native plant nurseries or sales that happen just in spring for different organizations. They're certainly easier to plant these smaller plants and you get more bang for your buck, right? You can get a tray of 32 for 130 or something like that. So, and then 1 to 2 inches of wood mulch just to start out with and never mulching again because you're going to let the plants do that, right?